great evil in the form of parasitic, non-human souls incarnated in human form on the earth, and subsequently created the conditions for the world we are living in today. In this video, I'm going to be doing a deep dive on the topic of the German Ernestine House of Wettin and the House of Saxe-Coburg Gotha that came from it, and other related people and subjects, because I have uncovered evidence in my research that suggests these houses were an integral part of how the evil took everything over. My name is Michelle Gibson. I have come to believe as a result of my research that there was a hostile takeover of the Earth's grid system after a deliberately caused cataclysm that resulted in a worldwide flood of mud which wiped out most, if not all, of the original civilization. I think pockets of original people existed in underground locations, as well as the beings behind this, until enough of the original infrastructure was dug out of the mud flow to restart civilization. Here goes. It's time to take the plunge. The Ernestine Duchies, also known as the Saxon Duchies, were a changing number of small states that were mostly located in the modern state of Thuringia and ruled by the dukes of the Ernestine line of the House of Wetton. Tracing back at least to Theodoric I of Wettin in the 10th century, we are told, the House of Wetton itself was one of the oldest in Europe and was a dynasty of German counts, dukes, prince-electors, and kings of territories in the present states of Saxony, Saxony-Anhalt, and Thuringia. The Treaty of Leipzig in 1485 divided the House of Wettin into two ruling branches, the Ernestine and the Albertine, which divided the Wettin lands into a Saxon and Thuringian part. Many ruling monarchs outside of Germany were later tied to the House of Saxe-Coburg Gotha, a cadet branch of the Ernestine branch of the House of Wetton. This is the coat of arms of the House of Wettin. As I present my research on the Ernestine House of Wettin and the House of Saxe-Coburg Gotha, I will share evidence for what I believe the image in the center of the coat of arms represents, and is telling us who incarnated into this lineage in order to seed a new royalty to replace the former royal houses and rule the earth. I find it noteworthy that the uniforms of the modern royals look just like the uniforms of the original royals. I believe that negative beings were behind the cataclysm and hostile takeover, and have executed and implemented an elaborate multi-generational plan comprised of fallen angels, reptilians, archons, and other negative extraterrestrial races, with a negative agenda towards humanity, the creator, and creation, all of whom have been interfering on Earth, but who have managed to convince most people they don't exist. Along with whatever caused the mud floods, I think a deliberately caused rip in the fabric of space-time resulted in the Great Frost of Ireland between 1740 and 1741, allowing for non-human souls to incarnate in human form. The Great Frost of Ireland of 1740 and 1741 was a 21-month period of time that is in the historical record in which the Irish population endured 21 months of bizarre weather without known precedent that defied conventional explanation. The cause is not known. I have speculated that the Great Frost of Ireland, which took place between 1740 and 1741, was the result of a rip in the fabric of space-time caused by the Philadelphia experiment. There is actually a time-traveling naval vessel in the field of information in the form of a 1980 movie called The Final Countdown, about the USS Nimitz going back in time to the day before the attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7th of 1941. While I certainly can't prove this theory, the Final Countdown could be an example of predictive programming. The negative beings have to tell us what they are doing to gain our consent for their actions, but they don't tell us they are telling us, and instead rely on such methods as predictive programming in movies, TV shows, and books, etc., in order to gain our tacit consent, since we don't know they are telling us something, rather than informed consent. Predictive programming is defined as storylines or even subtle images that in retrospect seem to hint at events that actually end up happening in the real world. I think this rip in the fabric of space-time allowed for non-human souls to incarnate in human form, because 3 years later, in 1744, Mayer Amschel Rothschild was born in Frankfurt, Germany. He established his banking business there in the 1760s, marking the start of the international banking family and ultimately the central banking system. Starting out as a dealer in rare coins, his business grew to include a number of princely patrons and continued to expand into an international banker and profiteer from the Napoleonic Wars. He sent his son Nathan to London in 1798, where a Rothschild bank was established in the city of London in 1804, and other sons were sent to found banks in the cities of Paris, Vienna, and Naples. During Great Britain's war against Napoleon, Nathan Mayer Rothschild became Britain's banker and paymaster on the continent, which contributed to the Duke of Wellington's defeat of Napoleon and consolidated the basis of the financial dynasty of the Rothschilds. On February 6 of 1748, Bavarian Illuminati founder Adam Weishaupt was born in Ingolstadt, Bavaria, Germany. He went to a Jesuit school at the age of 7 and was initiated into Freemasonry in 1777. Weishaupt's radical views on Illuminism got him in trouble with the ruler in Bavaria when writings of his were intercepted and deemed seditious, and he fled to the Duchy of Saxe-Gotha-Altenburg under the protection of Duke Ernest starting in 1784. Francis, Duke of Saxe-Coburg-Saalfeld, was born on July 15 of 1750 and was the progenitor of the House of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha line, which seeded the lineage of the new royals. Duke Francis was an art connoisseur who initiated a big collection of books and engravings, and his 300,000 picture collection of copper plate engravings is currently housed in the Vesta Coburg, a star fort that dominates the town of Coburg on Thuringia's border with Bavaria. Francis succeeded his father as the reigning Duke of Saxe-Coburg-Saalfeld in 1800. Prior to the dissolution of the Holy Roman Empire, the imperial throne of the Holy Roman Empire was occupied by the House of Habsburg, also called the House of Austria. The House of Habsburg was one of the most distinguished and influential royal houses of Europe. The Habsburg male line died out in 1740 with the death of Emperor Charles VI, and as a result of the War of Austrian Succession that took place between 1740 and 1748, the Empress Maria Theresa had to concede Habsburg lands in Austria, Spain, and Italy to other powers as part of the terms of the 1748 Treaty of Aix-la-Chapelle, which also confirmed the right of succession of the German House of Hanover to the British throne. King George I, the first British monarch of the German House of Hanover, succeeded to the throne on August 1st of 1714. The House of Stuart had been the ruling monarchs of the British Isles since King James VI of Scotland became King James I of England in 1613. The Stuart heir, James Francis Edward Stuart, known to history as the Pretender, left where he was living in France in February of 1717 to seek exile with Pope Clement XI in Rome, which was where he died in 1766. He would have been heir to the 3 thrones, but was forcibly prevented from claiming them when he tried to do so. The portrait on the left is believed to be a portrait of James Francis Edward Stuart that was painted when he lived in France. The revolutions of 1830 took place in France, Belgium, Italy, Brazil, Poland, and Switzerland, which was the same year that the Bavarian Order of the Illuminati founder Adam Weishaupt died in Gotha in November. These revolutions led to the establishment of constitutional monarchies and the substitution of the concept of popular sovereignty for hereditary right. In France, King Louis Philippe I of the Habsburg House of Bourbon's cadet branch, the House of Orleans, was the last king of France. Notice the differences in complexion of these portraits of him findable in a search, with the 4th one appearing to be a photograph of a man with a darker skin complexion. The two-tone facial coloration of the portrait of King Louis Philippe I reminded me of another one I had seen like that. I had seen it with the two-tone face of King Charles III of Spain, shown here. Then these are existing portraits and statues for comparison of King Philip II of Spain, also ruler of Portugal, as well as England and Ireland for a time, and the son of Holy Roman Emperor Charles V. These two portraits of Emperor Charles V are available to find in an internet search, again with similar facial structure between the two portraits, the tilt of the chins, and the similar clothing. The 1830 revolutions in Europe also led to Leopold, the son of Duke Francis of Saxe-Coburg Saalfeld, becoming Leopold I, the first king of the Belgians, in 1831. He had strong ties to Great Britain, as he had moved there and married Princess Charlotte of Wales in 1816, second in line to the British throne after her father, the Prince Regent, who became King George IV. She is recorded as having died after delivering a stillborn child, a year after they were married, leaving King George IV without any legitimate grandchildren. King George III's son, the Prince Regent George's brother, Prince Edward, ended up proposing to Leopold's older sister Victoria of Saxe-Coburg Saalfeld, who were the parents of the future Queen Victoria. King Leopold I was said to play an important role in the creation of Belgium's first railroad in 1835 and subsequent industrialization. We are told that Belgium was the second country in Europe to open a railway and produce locomotives after a private rail line opened between Stockton and Darlington in northeast England on September 27th of 1825. The very old-looking Skern Bridge was said to have been built in 1825 for the Stockton and Darlington Railroad and carried the first train on opening day. It is considered to be the oldest railway bridge in continuous use in the world. The first stretch of the Belgian railway network was said to have been completed between northern Brussels and Mechelen in 1835, and was the first steam passenger railway in continental Europe. By 1836, the line to Antwerp had been completed, and by 1843, 4 main lines had been added to the Belgian rail network. There are 6,893 miles, or 11,903 kilometers of railroad track in Belgium, which has the greatest mileage of rail per square mile in the world. This is the Antwerp Central Rail Station, said to have been built between 1895 and 1905 to replace the original wooden station from 1836. It was severely damaged by V-2 rockets during World War II. More on this subject later. So were they actually doing these heavy-duty engineering projects when they told us they were, during a time we are also taught in our history was low technology? Or were they just bringing the engineering technology from the Earth's original advanced civilization back online? On August 9th of 1832, Leopold married Louise Marie of Orléans, daughter of King Louis Philippe I of France. Their children included Leopold, Duke of Brabant, who succeeded his father as King Leopold II of the Belgians, ruling Belgium from 1865 until 1909. As a result of the 1884 Berlin Conference, under the direction of German Chancellor Otto von Bismarck, during which time the continent of Africa was divided up among the European colonial powers, Leopold II was allocated his own personal colony in what became known as the Belgian Congo. Seeing how much wealth the Congo had, King Leopold II started taking advantage of the abundance of raw materials in the country, especially rubber, which grew naturally in the rainforest there, and which inhabitants were forced to collect. Many strategies of forced labor were practiced to collect the rubber, and workers were assembled by extreme violence, like whipping people, and villages were plundered by soldiers and companies, and women were raped. The Congolese weren't seen as a people that had to be protected, and instead the soldiers would do things like cut the limbs off people to offer to their leaders as war trophies. Millions of Congolese people were killed as a result of these inhumane acts of violence, with estimates ranging anywhere between 3 million and 20 million deaths. The daughter of King Leopold I, Princess Charlotte, would become the future Empress of Mexico, when she married her cousin, Emperor Maximilian I of Mexico, an Austrian archduke, who accepted the job as the only emperor of the Second Mexican Empire in April of 1864, after an invitation from the French Emperor Napoleon III, who had invaded Mexico, along with Spain and Great Britain, to establish a new pro-French Mexican monarchy, with his support and some Conservative Party monarchists who were opposed to the Liberal Party administration of Benito Juarez. Maximilian's life was cut short due to execution by firing squad in 1867 after his capture by Republican forces, and the country's Republican government was then restored again under President Benito Juarez. Besides King Leopold I and Victoria, the mother of Queen Victoria, Duke Francis of Saxe-Coburg-Saalfeld fathered 5 other children who survived to adulthood. Ferdinand Georg August, born in Coburg as Prince Ferdinand of Saxe-Coburg-Saalfeld in 1785. In 1826, his title changed to Prince of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha when his brother, Duke Ernest I, made a territorial exchange with other members of the family. He married Maria Antonia Kohari de Sabrag in 1815. She was the heiress of the Kohari family and one of the 3 largest landowners in Bulgaria. By his marriage, Ferdinand established the Catholic cadet branch of the family, the House of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha Kohari, which gained the thrones of Portugal in 1837 and Bulgaria in 1887. After his father-in-law's death in 1826, Ferdinand inherited the Hungarian princely estate of Kohari, and formerly Lutheran, he converted to Roman Catholicism. Duke Francis's son Ernest I was the last sovereign Duke of Saxe-Coburg-Saalfeld, which he reigned as for 20 years, from 1806 to 1826, at which time he became the Duke of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, when the Ernestine Duchies were rearranged after Frederick IV, Duke of Saxe-Gotha-Altenburg, died without an heir, and Ernest ultimately received Gotha after he ceded Saalfeld to Saxe-Meiningen. The first wife of Duke Ernest I was Princess Louise of Saxe-Gotha-Altenburg, whom he married in July of 1817. They had 2 children, Ernest, who inherited his father's lands and titles, and Albert, who was later the husband of Queen Victoria. Duke Ernest I and his wife Louise divorced in 1826, and she was said to have died of cancer at the age of 30 in 1831. He married his niece, Marie of Württemberg, the 33-year-old daughter of his sister Antoinette, the Duchess of Württemberg, making her both stepmother and first cousin to the legitimate children of Ernest I. They did not have children of their own. In 1796, at the age of 14, Duke Francis's daughter, Princess Juliane of Saxe-Coburg-Saalfeld, married the Grand Duke Constantine Pavlovich, the grandson of Empress Catherine II, and she became known as Grand Duchess Anna Feodorovna. In many ways, their marriage was forced on them, and they never had children together. The marriage was finally annulled in 1820. The second oldest daughter of Francis I, Antoinette, the mother of her brother Ernest's second wife, married Alexander of Württemberg in November of 1798. Is that the hidden hand? With that hand inside coat gesture Napoleon himself was so well known for? The Urban Dictionary defines the hidden hand as a secret brotherhood that controls a network of secret societies, such as the Bavarian Illuminati and Freemasonry, that carry out the orders that are passed down to them through various levels of power, and that the only truly powerful family is the British royal family because of their bloodline. They are the highest authority and control everyone else through a network of secret societies that work under them. Alexander of Württemberg's sister, Sophia Dorothea, was married to Tsar Paul I, and she took the name Maria Feodorovna when she converted to the Russian Orthodox Church. Tsar Paul I was Emperor of Russia from his coronation in November of 1796 until his violent assassination in March of 1801 as a result of German, Russian, and British co-conspirators. Alexander of Württemberg was therefore uncle to both Tsars Alexander I and Nicholas I, and he and his wife Antoinette settled in St. Petersburg, Russia, where he had a military and diplomatic career. Antoinette, regarded as influential, was bearer of the Grand Cross of the Imperial Order of St. Catherine, and the last Grand Mistress of the Order, which was created by Tsar Peter the Great upon his marriage to Catherine I in 1714. Tsar Alexander I, whose reign went from 1801 to 1825, ruled Russia during the years of the Napoleonic Wars, which lasted from 1803 to 1815. Interestingly, when I searched for a picture of Tsar Alexander and the Napoleonic Wars, these pictures came up as well. The Franco-Russian Treaty of Tilsit, signed by Napoleon and Alexander on July 7th of 1807, ended the war between Imperial Russia and the French Empire, and began an alliance between the two empires that rendered the rest of continental Europe almost powerless. Sophie Frederica Caroline Louise was the oldest child of Duke Francis, and she married Emmanuel von Menstorff-Pouilly in 1804, and he was elevated to the rank of count in 1818. They lived in Mainz between 1824 and 1834, where her husband was the commander of the fortress of Mainz, and he served as vice-governor of Mainz between 1829 and 1834. Like her sister Antoinette, Sophie received the Dame Grand Cross of the Order of Catherine. This Mainz connection to the House of Saxe-Coburg Gotha got my attention because I had already discovered the Mainzer Adelsverein, or Nobility Society of Mainz, when I was researching an alignment starting in the San Antonio, New Braunfels area in Texas a while back. One of the founding members of the Adelsverein was Ernest II, the Duke of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, and the older brother of Prince Albert, mentioned previously. The Nobility Society of Mainz was organized on April 20th of 1842 as a colonial attempt to establish New Germany within the borders of Texas through organized mass immigration, and land was purchased via land grants from the Republic of Texas. It was a colonization campaign in Texas that was said to have lasted only until 1853 due to a large amount of debt. Now on to more notables in the second generation of offspring from Duke Francis of Saxe-Coburg-Saalfeld, with regards to this being the lineage that seeded the new royal houses of Europe. I have already talked about two of Duke Francis's grandchildren from the Belgian King Leopold I, King Leopold II, and Princess Charlotte, wife of the executed Emperor Maximilian I of Mexico. Victoria, the daughter of Prince Edward, son of King George III of Great Britain, and Victoria of Saxe-Coburg-Saalfeld, the daughter of Duke Francis, became the new Queen of England at the age of 18 on June 20th of 1837. Her father, Prince Edward, and grandfather, King George III, died within 6 days of each other in 1820, and there was no other surviving legitimate issue to claim the throne after King George I died in June of 1837. Queen Victoria's reign began on June 20th of 1837 and lasted for almost 64 years until her death on January 22nd of 1901. She was considered the last monarch of the House of Hanover through her father, Prince Edward. Her reign was characterized as a period of cultural, industrial, political, scientific, and military change within the United Kingdom, and marked by a great expansion of the British Empire. Queen Victoria married her first cousin, Prince Albert, the grandson of Duke Francis through his father, Duke Ernest I, on February 10th of 1840. Prince Albert was an important political advisor to his wife, and became the dominant influential figure in the first half of their lives together. Queen Victoria and Prince Albert produced 9 children, starting with Victoria, Princess Royal, on November 21st of 1840. Victoria, Princess Royal, married Frederick, son of German Emperor Wilhelm I, in 1858. On March 9th of 1888, in what was called the Year of the Three Emperors, the Princess Royal Victoria's husband became Emperor Frederick III upon the death of his father. Frederick III was only emperor for a short period of time, as he died just a little over 3 months later, on June 15th of 1888, allegedly from laryngeal cancer from smoking. The oldest of Frederick and Victoria's 8 children, and a holder of the House of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha bloodlines through his mother, became Emperor Wilhelm II on June 15th of 1888. Wilhelm II was forced to abdicate on November 9th of 1918, following the collapse of the German war effort at the end of World War I, making him the last German emperor, and the German government that followed his abdication was the Weimar Republic, filling the gap between the German Empire and Hitler's rise to power. More about the Weimar Republic later. Sophia, one of the daughters of Frederick and Victoria, became Queen of the Hellenes upon her marriage to Constantine I, King of the Hellenes, in October of 1889. The monarchy of Greece, for which the title of King of the Hellenes came into being, was created at the London Conference of 1832, convened by British Foreign Secretary Lord Palmerston, allegedly to establish a stable government in Greece after Greece had won its independence from the Ottoman Empire, with help from Great Britain, France, and Russia, after the Greek War for Independence that took place between 1821 and 1829. The great powers had assigned the borders of the new Greek state in the London Protocol of February 3rd of 1830. 3 of Queen Sophia's Saxe-Coburg and Gotha sons went on to become kings of the Hellenes: George II, Alexander I, and Paul. The second child of Queen Victoria and Prince Albert was the future King Edward VII, who was born on November 9th of 1841. He married Princess Alexandra of Denmark in 1836, and they had 3 sons, including the future King George V of Great Britain, and a daughter, who became the future Queen Maud of Norway. The third child of Victoria and Albert was Princess Alice Maud Mary, who was born on April 25th of 1843. In 1862, Princess Alice married Louis, the Grand Duke of Hesse and By-Rhine, and went to live with him in the ducal seat of Darmstadt. They had 7 children, one of whom was Princess Alix, who married Nicholas II of Russia, the last Tsar of Russia. Their 4th child, Alfred, was born on August 6th of 1844, starting his service in the Royal Navy in 1858 at the age of 14. During the time of his naval service, he went around the world, traveling to many places, including Australia. The Royal Prince Alfred Hospital was said to have been constructed in Sydney as a memorial building to raise a permanent and substantial monument, in testimony of the heartfelt gratitude of the community for the recovery of His Royal Highness, following the shooting of Prince Alfred in the back by a crazed gunman at a fundraising function he was attending. Construction was said to have started in 1876, and that the hospital first opened in 1882. Prince Alfred was first created the Duke of Edinburgh in May of 1866. In 1874, he married the Grand Duchess Maria Alexandrovna of Russia, the only surviving daughter of Russian Tsar Alexander II, and Princess Maria of Hesse and By-Rhine. Alfred became the Duke of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha upon the death of his uncle Ernest II in August of 1893, until his death from throat cancer in 1900. One of the daughters of Prince Alfred and Maria, the Duke and Duchess of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, Princess Marie, married the King of Romania, Ferdinand, in January of 1893, and they had 6 children, 3 of whom occupied royal thrones. Marie and Ferdinand's daughter, Princess Elizabeth, married her cousin King George II of Greece. Their son became King Carol II of Romania, who married his cousin Helen, who was the sister of King George II of Greece, and they produced the heir to the Romanian crown, Prince Michael, during their brief marriage. And lastly, another daughter of Queen Victoria's son Alfred, Maria, was married to King Alexander I of Yugoslavia from 1922 until his assassination in 1934. The son of King Alexander I and Queen Maria was King Peter II, the last Yugoslavian monarch. The fifth child of Queen Victoria and Prince Albert was Princess Helena, who was born on May 25th of 1846. She married the impoverished, Danish-born German prince, Christian of Schleswig-Holstein, in July of 1866, and they stayed in Great Britain, where she stayed within calling distance of Queen Victoria. They had 6 children, 4 of whom survived to adulthood, and their oldest son was killed in the Boer War. Princess Helena was the most active member of the royal family. She was one of the founding members of the British Red Cross and president of the Royal British Nurses Association. She was also president of the Workhouse Infirmary Nursing Association. I researched workhouses a while back when I was looking into how the New World could have been repopulated after the mud flood. The punitive and abusive workhouse system was established after the passing of the British Parliament's Poor Law Act of 1834, in which there was no cash or material support given, and the only option for those who lived there was hard work and forced labor inside the workhouse in exchange for meager sustenance. Homes were broken up, belongings sold, and families separated. The harsh system of the workhouse became synonymous with the Victorian era, an institution which became known for its terrible conditions, forced child labor, long hours, malnutrition, beatings, and neglect. I think such places were human warehouses during the very messy time of the reconstruction of the New World civilization from the Old World, while the so-called elites lived high on the hog. Princess Louise Caroline Alberta, the 6th child of Queen Victoria and Prince Albert, was born on March 18th of 1848. She was known for her rebellious nature. Princess Louise married John the Marquess of Lorne in March of 1871. Her husband John was appointed Governor-General of Canada for 6 years, between 1878 and 1884, making her viceregal consort, and her given names were used to name many places in Canada, including Lake Louise and the province of Alberta. The 7th child of Queen Victoria and Prince Albert was Prince Arthur, Duke of Connaught and Strathearn, who was born on May 1st of 1850. He married Princess Louise Margaret of Prussia, a great-niece of German Emperor Wilhelm I, in March of 1879. They had 3 children, one of which was their oldest daughter, Princess Margaret, who married the Crown Prince of Sweden at the time, Gustav VI Adolf, and their heirs included monarchs of Sweden, Denmark, and Greece. Queen Victoria's son, Prince Arthur, served as an officer in the British Army for 40 years. In 1910, he was the first member of the royal family to become Governor-General of Canada. He acted as the King's representative, and in this capacity as the Canadian Commander-in-Chief, through the first years of World War I. The 8th child of Victoria and Albert was Prince Leopold, born on April 7th of 1853. He had hemophilia, which contributed to his death following a fall at the age of 30. More on the hemophilia gene in Queen Victoria's descendants in a moment. Prince Leopold engaged in more intellectual pursuits as opposed to physical through the course of his life because of hemophilia, and he attended Christ Church at Oxford University, becoming president of its chess club. An active Freemason, Leopold was initiated into the Apollo University Lodge at Christ Church, where his brother Prince Edward was the worshipful master of the lodge at the time. Prince Edward later served as Grand Master of the United Lodge of England between 1874 and 1901, when he became King Edward VII upon the death of his mother. Prince Leopold eventually married Princess Helena Frederica of the German state of Waldeck and Pyrmont, and they had a daughter and a son who was born after Prince Leopold died. Their son, Charles Edward, became the last reigning Duke of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha from 1900 to 1918 at the end of World War I. The 9th and last child of Victoria and Albert was Princess Beatrice, who was born on April 14th of 1857. Her childhood coincided with the death of her father on December 14th of 1861, and her mother's grief at his loss. It is also interesting to note the year Princess Beatrice was born, in 1857, was the same year Queen Victoria was presented with the responsibility of choosing the location for the permanent capital of Canada, with Ottawa being described as a small frontier town, and that the Canadian Parliament buildings were said to have been constructed between 1859 and 1866 in an architectural style called Gothic Revival. Then the following year, in 1858, the last Mughal emperor in India, Bahadur Shah Zafar, was deposed by the British East India Company and exiled. Through the Government of India Act of 1858, the British Crown assumed direct control of the British East India Company-held territories in India in the form of the new British Raj, and the new title of Queen Empress of India was created for her in 1876. Just wanted to share more of the ways of how everything was taken over and claimed during the long reign of Queen Victoria. Back to Princess Beatrice. She stayed close to her mother as her personal assistant. Her search for a husband landed her with Prince Henry of Battenberg, the son of Prince Alexander of Hesse and by Rhine, and her mother consented with the agreement they would make their home with her. They had 2 sons and a daughter, with their daughter, Victoria Eugenie, becoming Queen of Spain when she married King Alfonso VIII of Spain in May of 1906, and they had 6 children. Their family line continues on through the Spanish royal house today. The oldest son of Victoria and Albert, Prince Edward of Wales, became King Edward VII of the United Kingdom and British Dominions and Emperor of India when Queen Victoria died in 1901. He was the first British monarch of the House of Saxe-Coburg Gotha. On July 17th of 1917, during the reign of King George V, the name of the royal house was changed to Windsor, supposedly due to anti-German sentiment generated by World War I. The Battenberg family, also of German origin, decided to do the same thing, allegedly for the same reason, and also in 1917 changed their name to the anglicized Mountbatten. Now about hemophilia in Queen Victoria's descendants. While considered relatively rare in the general population, hemophilia is an inherited bleeding disorder in which the blood does not clot properly, and is prevalent in Europe's royal families, with the hemophilia gene said to have passed along from Queen Victoria to the ruling families of Russia, Spain, and Germany. The presence of the hemophilia gene in Queen Victoria was said to have been caused by a spontaneous mutation, as she is considered the source of the disease in modern cases of hemophilia among her descendants, noted in red in this chart. For some reason, some of the Nazi human experimentation and concentration camps during World War II involved the study of a substance made from beet and apple pectin called polygol for its effectiveness in aiding blood clotting. I came across the name of Baron Stockmar of Coburg when I was researching the children of Victoria and Albert because he was involved in the supervision of their education. I had never heard of him before. He was a very important and influential advisor of Victoria and Albert. Who exactly was Baron Stockmar? Born in Coburg, Germany in 1787, Baron Stockmar was a German physician. In 1816, he became the personal physician of the future King of the Belgians, Leopold I, at the time Prince Leopold of Saxe-Coburg Gotha, when Leopold married Princess Charlotte of the United Kingdom, the only child of King George IV. After Charlotte died giving birth to a stillborn son a year later, Baron Stockmar stayed in Leopold's service as his private secretary, comptroller of the household, and political advisor. Here they are together in the television series Victoria and Albert. Baron Stockmar took up residence in Coburg after Leopold became King of the Belgians in 1831 and continued to advise him. In 1837, King Leopold I sent Baron Stockmar to serve as an advisor to Queen Victoria, and one of his first tasks was to brief her on whether or not Albert was a suitable husband. After their marriage, Baron Stockmar became a counselor and educator of their children. In 1848, he was also made the ambassador of the Duchy of Saxe-Coburg Gotha to the Parliament of what was at the time the German Confederation. Nothing suspicious going on here, right? Move along. I firmly believe that what we know of as the Victorian era was actually the official beginning of the New World Order timeline reset, with Queen Victoria presiding over what I believe was its official kickoff at the Great Exhibition at the Crystal Palace in 1851. Monuments dedicated to Prince Albert include his memorial in the Kensington Gardens, which opened in 1872, where he is said to be holding the catalogue of the Great Exhibition, which he was said to have inspired and helped organize. And Prince Albert's cairn, said to have been erected in his memory on the Balmoral estate in Scotland after his death in 1861. Memorials to Victoria include the Victoria Memorial in London on the Mall in front of Buckingham Palace, and what was originally known as the Victoria Terminus train station in Mumbai, India. The terminus was said to have been designed by British architectural engineer Frederick William Stevens in the style of Victorian Italianate Gothic Revival architecture, with construction starting in 1878 and completed in 1887, marking the 50-year anniversary of Queen Victoria's rule. Thus, the new royalty were made larger than life and provided cover, in too many examples to count, for what the ancient advanced Moorish civilization actually built. Next, I'm going to leave Great Britain and head over to Portugal for a moment. The grandson of the original Duke Francis of Saxe-Coburg Saalfeld, Ferdinand II, married Maria II, the Queen of Portugal, and their son became Pablo V of Portugal, starting in 1853 until his early death from cholera or typhoid 7 years later. The significance of the marriage of Ferdinand to Maria was the joining of the Portuguese House of Braganza with the German House of Saxe-Coburg Gotha to become the House of Braganza-Saxe-Coburg Gotha. This is its coat of arms, with 2 green wyvern supporters on either side of the insignia, and what I think represents the tail of the wyvern within the coat of arms. As a matter of fact, the wyvern tail section is found in the coats of arms of not only the House of Saxe-Coburg Gotha, but in the other European royal houses it seated, like that of Hungary, Belgium, Bulgaria, and seen in Prince Albert's personal coat of arms. Wyverns are 2-legged, winged creatures that are similar to dragons, but unlike dragons, which can be good or evil, they are unambiguously malicious predators. Wyverns in heraldry signify war, envy, and pestilence, and that is exactly what was ushered in. I think the members of the House of Saxe-Coburg Gotha were telling us who they really were: non-human reptilian souls in human form. Earth went from being heaven on earth during the time of its original advanced positive civilization to hell on earth as a result of the hijack that took place here. It certainly appears that the different wars and revolutions were all about bringing down the once stable hereditary ruling houses of the ancient regime, going far back in time, whose identity was misrepresented and whitewashed in our historical narrative, and the new royal families were replaced with the House of Saxe-Coburg Gotha bloodline. There are 2 historical points of interest that I would like to bring forward. The first is the Weimar Republic, which was Germany's government between the abdication of Emperor Wilhelm II and Hitler's rise to power. Weimar is a city in the same part of Germany as the Duchies of the Ernestine House of Wetton. While the city was a focal point of the German Enlightenment in the 17th and 18th centuries, it is best known as the place where Germany's first democratic constitution was signed after the First World War, giving its name to the Weimar Republic. The Weimar Republic, officially called the German Reich, was the German federal state from 1918 to 1933. The years of the Weimar Republic were characterized by economic troubles, weak government, and by decadence. Under the terms of the Treaty of Versailles, which was signed at the end of the First World War, Germany lost its overseas colonies and some important international trade routes. Tea and tobacco supplies dried up quickly, but almost all drugs, including cocaine and heroin, were legal to buy. Thus, the city of Berlin was awash with drugs, and gender rules were smashed altogether. Many Germans were financially ruined at the end of World War I. Prostitution was deregulated, and in the 1920s, the streets of Berlin were filled with prostitutes of all ages, needing to make a living. And it wasn't just women. Cabarets and dance halls in Berlin were booming in Weimar Germany, with hard drugs frequently given to customers for free upon entrance. Androgyny was all the rage in Berlin cabarets, with some of the most popular acts being male and female impersonators. very similar to Las Vegas and Nevada today, with free drinks and drag shows. Was what happened during this time in the Weimar Republic early experimentation by the controllers with their agenda to confuse, mess up, and control the human race? The other historical point I would like to highlight were the V-weapon missile attacks on the cities of London and Antwerp under the direction of the German High Command. London suffered severe damage from extensive bombing by the German Air Force between 1940 and 1941, and again in 1944 and 1945. And Antwerp in Belgium was bombed for months starting in 1944. The heaviest bombing in London took place between September of 1940 and May of 1941 in 71 air raids, dropping 18,000 tons of high explosives in what is called the Blitz. We are told that prior to the bombing, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of children, were moved to the countryside to avoid the bombing. It was called Operation Pied Piper. Then between 1944 and 1945, the V2 attacks began on London, killing over 2,700 people and injuring 6,500 others. By war's end, it is estimated there were around 30,000 deaths and 50,000 serious injuries in London as a result of the extensive bombing campaigns. In Antwerp, German missile launching crews fired more than 4,000 V1s and more than 1,000 V2s at Greater Antwerp, with Antwerp becoming known as the City of Sudden Death. Is it not strange that the Nazi Germans would be so hell-bent on destroying these places and countries ruled by the same bloodline of German origin? When I was doing research on who were the Nazis really, I learned about the Frankfurt National Assembly, which convened on May 18th of 1848 at St. Paul's Church in Frankfurt, Germany. In December of 1848, the Basic Rights for the German people proclaimed the equal rights of all citizens before the law, and a constitution was passed by the National Assembly, with Germany to be a constitutional monarchy, and the office of head of state was to be held hereditarily by the respective king of Prussia. However, the new constitution was not recognized by Prussia, Austria, Bavaria, Hanover, and Saxony. While there was more wrangling back and forth by the different German states in an effort to unify them, ultimately, we are told, the revolutions of 1848 fizzled because of divisions between these states, and that by 1851, the basic rights had also been abolished nearly everywhere. Upon closer examination, I happened to notice that the illustration at the top of the Basic Rights for the German People proclamation portrays 3 women standing on top of what looks like a snake or reptile of some kind. And why is there a broken chain depicted? To bring this up to the present day, I searched for this posting on the royal.uk website that I remembered seeing several years ago when it was first reported, and is an admission that the Queen is not human. The royal.uk website is the home of the royal family on the internet, so this admission was not from a second-hand source of information about the royal family. BBC television personality Jimmy Savile was knighted by the Queen in 1990 for charitable services. He died in 2011, and after his death, many reports of his involvement with extreme sexual deviancy came to the surface, including, but not limited to, pedophilia. While fact-checkers claim this incident was a viral hoax, an onlooker videotaped a young man escaping from the window of a Buckingham Palace bedroom. I remember seeing this when it first went viral. Thanks to the internet, the hidden hand is hidden no more, though Buckingham Palace denied this as well. Be mindful if you are public figures and don't want your secrets to come to light. Or maybe they don't care if their secrets come out. Maybe they are so arrogant and out of touch, they just say it isn't what it looks like and think it will be accepted just because they say so. Thankfully, the internet has a long memory for those who know where to look. Mainstream media is completely propagandized and used for mind control, and I have only followed alternative media for years, where all of these photos and information came to my attention in the past. Think of movies like The Matrix and They Live as documentaries instead of fictional stories. Gary Carlson of iCheckYourSoul.com confirms the belief that the perpetrators of these evil crimes against humanity are reptilian and not human. He provides soul reports and other spiritual services through contact with higher dimensional guides. He communicated to me that he found out with his ability to check souls that the people who have stolen our history aren't human. They have human bodies, but they don't have human souls. They have reptilian souls that don't have empathy for others like our souls do. I think there are other non-human souls in human form in the mix, with a negative agenda for humanity, but reptilian souls are the best known. I personally believe they will not get away with what they've done, and that humanity will have a better future than what was planned for us. We just have to get to the other side of this strange, surreal time that we are currently in the midst of.